Welcome everybody to the Canadian Diabetes Association 2016 webinar series. My name is Helena Macario and I'll be your host today. We're delighted that you're able to join us today for the webinar to learn about the exercise solution. To start off, I'd like to draw your attention to the survey at the top right-hand section of your screen. In order to better serve your needs, we kindly ask that you provide us with your input by completing the short survey towards the end of the presentation. We thank you in advance for your input. Throughout the presentation, you'll have the opportunity to type in the Q&A box located at the bottom right of your screen. We ask that you use this box for any questions that you may have along the way, and our presenter will be happy to answer them at the end of the presentation. As well, we will be displaying a few polling questions throughout the presentation. We would love your participation in these questions to gauge who our audience members are. Please note that your answers are completely anonymous. Also note that you're able to customize your screen to expand or collapse any of the screens that you see. So feel free to adjust them as needed by dragging down the bottom right-hand corner. The presentation itself will be about 40 to 45 minutes in length, with 15 minutes at the end for questions. It is important to note that it will be recorded and posted to the Canadian Diabetes Association website at a later date. So now I would like to welcome our speaker, Dr. Jonathan Little, and thank him for joining us today. Before turning it over to Dr. Little, I'd like to give you a brief introduction. So, Dr. Jonathan Little completed his doctoral training at McMaster University and completed a postdoctoral fellowship at the University of British Columbia with research on how low-volume, high-intensity interval training can induce metabolic adaptations. He's currently an assistant professor in the School of Health and Exercise Science at the University of British Columbia, Okanagan. Dr. Little's laboratory has the goal of determining the exercise strategy that is most effective for improving sugar control while also promoting long-term adherence. So without further ado, I present to you Dr. Little.
Well, thank you very much for the introduction, and thanks everyone for joining me today. Hopefully you will gain from the talk, and we can all do some learning, because I know I always learn from interacting with individuals who either have diabetes or work with people that have diabetes when we're talking about exercise. So first we have a couple of poll questions just for me and us to gauge who we are interacting with today. So if you can take some time to quickly answer that. First poll question, how are you affected by diabetes? And I'll give you a couple seconds to do that. All right. So we have a little bit of a mix, which is great. We have some individuals with type 1 and type 2 diabetes at risk, and healthcare professionals and people looking just for some information. So I hopefully will have information for everybody here today. The talk is slanted towards type 2 diabetes. We will talk about type 1 diabetes a little bit, but suffice to say with exercise, a lot of the benefits, or almost all of the benefits, do transfer over, and the practical implications that we'll talk about certainly are not specific to type 2 or type 1 diabetes or prediabetes for that matter. Again, one more poll question is just how are you participating today? Are you an individual or a group? And if you can answer that one for us, that would help as well. Okay, mostly individuals there, so that's great. Thank you for participating. There's going to be another couple of poll questions as we go out, where I'll be asking you for your feedback or information. Before we go on, I just want to state that I have no relevant disclosures. My lab receives competitive research funding from mostly government sources, as well as one industry partner and some diabetes-related companies. The good thing when you study exercise is that there's no real conflicts of interest, because I'm promoting physical activity and exercise and no products in my research. So our learning objectives today, hopefully by the end of today, you will learn a little bit about each of these three facts. So the first one is, what are the different types of exercise that might benefit someone with diabetes? Put more simply, what type of exercise should or could I do? The second one is to understand some common barriers to exercise and strategies to overcome that. And this gets a little bit more complex, as I'm sure many of you know. Sticking with exercises is not easy over the long term, but hopefully I can help you if you're someone who's trying to get exercise, or a healthcare provider who's trying to encourage their clients or patients to increase their exercise habits. And this would be, how can I make exercise a part of my regular routine, and what resources are available for me? And the third one is we're going to have some videos of some practical exercise options, and I've kind of broken these down into beginner, intermediate, and advanced levels, and I'll discuss those when we get there. But essentially, these are what are some exercises that I can do, and how do I do them? And hopefully the videos will help for those of you who are maybe just starting exercise and don't know what some of the terminology is. So let's jump right into that first learning objective. So what type of exercise could or should I do? And we will start with a couple of definitions. I do not like definitions too much, but oftentimes when I'm teaching or when we're talking, it's good just to get on the same page with definitions. So what is exercise? And again, these are research-type definitions, but I think it helps to understand what we're talking about today. So exercise is defined as planned, repetitive movement that you do purposefully to try to improve your health or fitness. Okay? And exercise is a subset of physical activity, which is a much broader definition, and that includes any kind of movement that you're going to do throughout the day that's above rest. So that can include gardening, housework, if you get out to go for a walk. And physical activity does include that purposeful exercise when you're actually going out for the purpose of improving your health. And then another related definition that's gotten a lot of attention in recent years, you've probably heard about this, is sedentary behavior or sitting. And again, the technical definition is any waking activity where you have a low exercise or low energy expenditure when you're sitting or lying down. And all of these are interrelated, and everybody should be striving to increase their physical activity and decrease their sedentary behavior. And some strategies there are taking the stairs, taking a standing break instead of sitting all day, schedule a walking meeting, actively commute, so try to walk or bike to get to your destination. You can park your car further away from the doorway. You can take your dog for a walk. And these are all things that are going to be beneficial. But today we're not talking about those. We're talking about exercise, so the planned repetitive movement that you're doing to try to improve your health and fitness. So a purposeful physical activity that you're going to engage in. So with that as a background, why would exercise be good for somebody with diabetes, type 1 or type 2, or even pre-diabetes, or even someone who doesn't have pre-diabetes or type 2 diabetes but just wants to improve their health? Why is exercise so good for helping us? And we need to understand a little bit of basic physiology here. And I think that this, many of you will know this, but just so that we're on the same page, when we consume a meal that has carbohydrate in it, our blood glucose levels go up. And what happens is our organ called our pancreas detects that increase in glucose, and it releases insulin. And insulin goes out into our blood. Insulin binds to receptors, which are on different tissues, and most important are muscle, liver, and fat. And insulin is like the key that opens up those tissues to allow glucose to go in. So insulin's going to go up, allow glucose to go in, and then the glucose levels go down after you've consumed the meal. And in a normal, healthy, functioning body, this works very well to control your blood glucose levels in a very tight range. The issue that happens with type 2 diabetes, and this happens early on, so we think that the process takes about 10 years to develop, and that's why individuals who are at risk for diabetes, they already have some of this pathology going on. And what happens is your pancreas is very good at producing insulin in these early stages, And oftentimes you produce even excess insulin. You're trying to compensate, but the insulin doesn't work. So there's like a wall that's built. The insulin can't talk to the muscle or the liver or the fat, so it can't tell the glucose to go in. And that results in your blood glucose levels going up into the high zone after you consume a meal. So that's what's going on in type 2 diabetes or pre-diabetes. Type 1 diabetes is a little bit different, but again, the benefits of exercise hold true. In type 1 diabetes, obviously your pancreas undergoes an autoimmune attack and you can't produce the insulin. So then the insulin's not there to be able to do its job. So if we look at this in a picture, muscle is the most important sink for getting rid of that glucose in your blood. So if insulin is working well, glucose, which is shown as the little green circles here, is going to be in your blood. Insulin, the little yellow squares, is very effective, and you're able to get that glucose into the muscles, and your glucose levels are tightly controlled. In the case of type 2 diabetes or pre-diabetes, the insulin doesn't work, therefore the glucose gets stuck in the blood, and that's why you have elevated levels of glucose, or at least one reason why. Exercise can overcome this. Exercise uses a completely different biochemical pathway to get glucose into the blood. So we won't get into all the details. To get glucose from the blood into the muscle. So we won't get into the details, but essentially exercise can bypass any defects that you have in your insulin signaling and get glucose from the blood into the muscle. And that should make sense because when you're exercising, your muscle needs energy. So it's got some pathways set up to get more energy into the muscle cells so that they can use the glucose and generate some energy for exercise. So exercise uses a different pathway and it bypasses any defects or any impairments in the insulin signaling pathway. So that's beneficial because exercise can kind of work as an alternative to insulin to get glucose into your muscle. And we know that exercise has immediate benefits. So your muscles need energy during exercise, and they're going to suck up more glucose during that exercise bout. So that has immediate benefits. And we're not going to get into this today, but my lab is interested in some of these actions of exercise if you time it at different points in the day. And we think one of the best times to exercise is going to be after you consume a meal, particularly breakfast. So if your glucose levels are surging up after breakfast and you do a little bit of exercise, your muscles are going to suck up that extra glucose, and that's going to have some immediate benefits for you. The other really cool thing about exercise is that it makes your muscles more sensitive to the insulin for the next 1 or 2 days. So if you do a bout of exercise today, your muscles are able to see the insulin better for at least another day. So that means that insulin works better after exercise. And this happens even in people with type 2 diabetes, people with type 1 diabetes, people with pre-diabetes, and people with normal glucose control. So your muscles get sensitized to the insulin. And that's probably why the guidelines that we have for exercise and diabetes say that we should have no more than 2 days off between exercise because each bout is effective. And what's really important about that, I see some questions coming in about exercise and losing weight. The great thing about exercise for people with type 2 diabetes is that you don't have to lose weight for exercise to work. Every single bout of exercise that you do has benefits on your glucose levels. So that should hopefully be used as a motivator. And we talk to a lot of the participants in our research studies and we say, it's okay if you don't lose weight because when you exercise today, you're going to get benefits for the next day. So if you've fallen off the wagon and you haven't exercised regularly, you don't have to be demoralized and say, oh, I need to be doing this all the time. Every bout that you do is going to have a beneficial effect. So what are the different types of exercise that we can do? Most people are familiar with the first one here, and that's traditional aerobic exercise. And we could define that as any activity that leads to a sustained increase in your heart rate for more than 10 minutes. So this is walking, swimming, cycling, jogging, any exercise that you're going to do continuously for 10 or more minutes. Many of you are probably also familiar with resistance training or weight training, and that's when you're going to contract a muscle against an external load or resistance. And weightlifting, as you will see in the videos, is not just for going to the gym and grabbing the dumbbells or the barbells and lifting them around. We can use resistance bands, which are very effective for this. And if you're at home, you don't even need resistance bands. You can use soup cans and milk jugs and water jugs and things like that to be creative, to be able to do some resistance training in your home. Another one that I want to talk about, which is gaining popularity for diabetes type 2 and type 1, is interval training. And we're going to talk about that. This is alternating a pattern of hard and easy exercise. And I would like to dispel some misconceptions about interval training today, in that it's not just for athletes. And when we're talking about interval training, we're not talking about sprinting all out or boot camp style. It's just picking up the pace of your regular walk, for example, a little bit out of your comfort zone for a few seconds and then taking a break. And this has been shown to be very effective, not only for your glucose levels, but for your cardiovascular health as well. And then I think it's important to talk about some other types of exercise, which some of them have been shown to be effective, particularly in type 2 diabetes, such as yoga. And these are exercises that incorporate some aerobic, some resistance, some flexibility, some balance. There's also a stress reduction and a mindfulness and meditation component to some of these other types of exercise. So from a research perspective, that makes it hard to tease out whether it was the exercise or the stress reduction, but certainly these types of exercise can be helpful and beneficial for people who have diabetes. So the CDA guidelines for exercise, and these are in line with what the guidelines are for people who don't have diabetes. They're essentially the same. And the guidelines say we should do a minimum of 150 minutes of moderate to vigorous intensity aerobic exercise each week and resistance training 3 times per week. Now that's a heck of a lot of exercise if you think of this and you're someone who's not exercising currently, and you look and you say, wow, all of a sudden I've got to do 150 minutes of walking every week, and I need to lift weights 3 times a week. So these are the goals, but certainly, and I don't have time to get into all of the evidence, but hopefully we'll talk about some. You don't need to do quite this much exercise to get benefits. So you kind of think of it as the biggest benefit you get is from going from doing no exercise to doing a little bit or some of exercise. You get more benefits as you work up to this 150 minutes and 3 times per week, but certainly you shouldn't think of it as, if I don't get there, it's not worth it. The best benefits of exercise come from going from nothing to doing something. And again, as little as 10-minute bouts of walking can be beneficial. And again, the weight training, I'll give you some tips for that, but that doesn't need to be going to the gym, buying a membership, and learning how to lift weights. That can be done right in your home, and you can modify your lifestyle to fit this in. But these are what the guidelines or the goals would be. So let's just look at each type of those exercise that we talked about. So traditional aerobic exercise, weightlifting, intervals, yoga, tai chi, and see what the scientific evidence is for these working. So I'm a scientist. I like to understand, or at least have confirmation, that what I'm telling people to do has been shown to be effective. And certainly traditional aerobic exercise, walking, cycling, swimming, has been shown to be effective. This is just one example. This is called a meta-analysis. This is when researchers pool together the results of many studies. They do some fancy statistics, and get a very good idea of what, on the whole, is the effects of an exercise intervention. And this study was led by Canadian researchers, which is why I highlighted it. Some of my colleagues that work at University of Alberta and University of Calgary. And they show that just 2 to 3 days per week of traditional, continuous cardio-type exercise for 3 to 4 months reduces your A1C by an average of about 0.7%. Now, the healthcare providers that are watching will know that this is a fairly substantial and meaningful reduction. Those of you who get your A1C checked will know that if you get a bump down by 0.66%, you'd probably be pretty happy with that. It's in line with what the effects of our best drugs can do, drugs like metformin, which are commonly prescribed. This is about the same magnitude of difference you would get. Importantly here, for those, when they analyzed all these studies, exercise did this without reducing body weight. So you don't have to lose weight to get the benefits of exercise on your blood sugar levels. And again, from what we learned about at the start, that's because when you exercise, you're targeting your muscles become better at taking up glucose, better at seeing insulin, and you don't need to lose weight to get the benefits. And that should be taken as an encouragement. I know lots of people exercise with the goal of losing weight, but if you can shift that goal to say, I'm exercising because it benefits my sugars, you can be confident that that's going to benefit you even if you don't lose weight. So what about type 1 diabetes? And again, there's much more research done on type 2 diabetes than type 1, but my colleagues, again, at University of Alberta and Calgary have done some work on this, and there's studies that show, yes, for sure, exercise improves your fitness in type 1 diabetes. Exercise reduces your future risk of death, so those individuals with type 1 diabetes who are active tend to live longer. The question of whether exercise improves glucose control in type 1 diabetes is a little bit trickier. Anyone out there with type 1 diabetes or any of the healthcare providers will know that when you exercise, it usually changes your insulin dose that you need to do, and it takes some skill and some practice to figure this out. How much do I reduce my insulin dose based on the exercise that I did? So if you think of this, lots of times you might not get a lower A1C value after you've done a few months of exercise, but you might have used less insulin, and that's probably a benefit for someone with type 1 diabetes. So we have to be careful here in translating the glucose-lowering effects of type 2 to type 1 because your glucose might not be improved, but it might have cost you less insulin to do that or made your insulin dosing regimen different. But certainly, if we look beyond just glucose, exercise has clear benefits for individuals with type 1 diabetes. What about resistance training? And again, weight training has been tested in both type 2 and type 1 diabetes with clear benefits. When you lift weights, your muscles get stronger. And when your muscles get stronger, it can make activities of daily living easier. So rising from your chair or carrying the groceries, and those things can get better, as well as it tends to improve your balance and reduce your risk of falling, for example. But what about on your blood sugars? And here's a big study, again, done in Canada. We've got some great diabetes researchers in Canada. And the A1C value is on the y-axis, and the different types of exercise that the folks did are on the x-axis. And you see that aerobic training, the first one, when you compare the black to the white bars, lowers your A1C by about 0.5%. Resistance training on its own is very similar, but when you combine the two together and you do 3 days a week of aerobic training and 2 days a week of resistance training, you get the largest reduction. You get the most bang for your buck by doing both. And again, this is a big reason why those CDA guidelines suggest that we do 150 minutes of walking with 3 times a week of resistance training, because it looks like it works better if you do both. And you get the added benefits when you add resistance training of your muscle strength going up and your activities of daily living becoming easier. So certainly resistance training has some great benefits for us here. The next one I talked about was interval training, and don't worry about all the graphs here. They can be simplified with kind of one statement. But interval training is where you pick up the pace for 30 seconds up to a couple minutes, and then you back off. And again, this is traditionally used by athletes. You think of an athlete running around a track or sprinting. For people with diabetes or people with prediabetes, that's not what we're talking about with interval training. We're just talking about picking up the pace of your walk. So if you're walking, you increase the pace so that it's just a little bit out of your comfort zone. There's been some great studies done in Denmark. All of the studies so far are small, and people in Denmark seem to be able to do lots of exercise, much more than the typical Canadian or North American. So this is a study where these folks did 5 days a week of 60 minutes of walking, which is pretty impressive when you think about it. And when they do this for 16 weeks, and these researchers compared continuous walking, which is shown in the crossed bars, to interval walking, which is shown in black, and then a group that did nothing. They stuck with their typical lifestyle where they weren't exercising, and that's in the white bars. And the conclusions here that we got was that if you don't do any exercise, you continue to maintain your sedentary lifestyle, you tend to get worse over 4 months. So in both your body mass in the top left, your fat mass in the bottom left, and your glucose levels tend to get higher. So we probably would think this is acceptable, or we might know this already. If I don't do anything for 4 months, I tend to get a little bit worse. If you did the continuous walking training in this study, you got a little bit better and you prevented getting worse. But the interval walking training shown in the black was better for everything that they measured, ranging from losing weight, losing fat, improving their glucose levels, and they also showed improved fitness. So they're following up in Denmark now with a huge study where they're getting individuals to do this. The people walk free living on their own, and they're tracked by a little physical activity tracker that's connected to an app to try to see what this interval walking training can do over a longer period. And we're working on some of this interval walking in our lab. Again, it's not sprinting. It's just picking up the pace of your walk. And for folks that are comfortable with exercise, you can go out and go for a walk for 30 minutes, and you feel comfortable doing that. Adding some of these little bursts into your walking where you pick up the pace can be a very effective strategy to get a little bit more bang for your buck out of your exercise session. The next type of exercise that we talked about, or that I mentioned, was yoga. And there's actually quite a bit of research done on yoga and glucose levels. And yoga is effective. It lowers your fasting blood sugars and your A1C. Again, don't worry about all the details here. I'm just showing you that there's been more than one study done, which is always good. And the researchers did a meta-analysis, so they pooled it all together and they used some fancy math. But they showed in all of these studies that individuals who did 3 to 4 months of yoga have a reduction in their blood glucose levels. The studies vary widely. Lots of them are coming from India and Asia, but the researchers tested for that to see if there was different effects, and the studies done in North America had the same effects, so there didn't seem to be any differences. So it looks like yoga is effective, and again, this can be have spillover effects. So it might not just be the exercise; it might be the stress reduction. It might be the fact that you're typically doing this in a group and interacting with other individuals. But clearly, yoga seems to have some beneficial effects. When we look at something like Tai Chi, it's a little bit less clear. So there's been some studies done, and again, when the researchers get together and they pool them all together, there's little snippets in a small study that Tai Chi might be effective, but overall, it doesn't seem to have the same scientific evidence that something like yoga or walking or resistance training has. So again, not saying that Tai Chi is bad, but from a research perspective, we just don't have the data yet. That doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, but if you were deciding what to do or trying to pick something to do, if you wanted to follow the evidence, you would pick walking, resistance training, yoga, and if you're comfortable, maybe some of the interval walking type training. So as we move on here, we've been talking, or I've been focused on glucose control because this is a webinar for diabetes, and that's kind of the language that the currency that we speak in when we are talking about diabetes. But certainly, lowering glucose is not the only reason you should exercise. And you can find lots of these things online, 50 other reasons to exercise. And I won't go through them all here, but certainly, there are many, many benefits of exercise that extend far beyond glucose control. So even if you don't care about your glucose control or don't monitor it or exercise isn't seem to be having great effects, there is a ton of other spillover effects. I always, when I'm talking with individuals, healthcare providers, I always talk about the side effects of exercise. They outweigh any of the drugs out there because pretty much all the side effects of exercise are good for us. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a background and some of the evidence of why exercise is good and what types you can do. Now I want to cover, probably even more important, is how do I actually implement this or make exercise a part of my regular routine? And before we go on, I just want to do a quick poll here. So hopefully if you're still there and can answer this question here. But what is your biggest barrier that prevents you from exercising? If you're already an exerciser, then say, what's your biggest barrier that makes it hard for you if you're currently a regular exerciser? And the answers are listed there. If you can take a few minutes, or a few seconds, and let me know, and we'll see what type of responses we get. Okay, so this is exactly what I thought. The number one cited reason that why people say they don't exercise is a lack of time, and I hopefully will help dispel this myth and give you some tips. Some people say it's a lack of knowledge, and again, that's an important point. If you don't have the knowledge or the confidence to be able to do it, you might say, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Hopefully the videos and some of the tips that I can give you will help. Certainly, enjoyment is a factor, and you need to try to find an exercise that's enjoyable, and some tips on how to get over that or to do it with a friend. Find someone that you can do it with and hold you accountable. That can make it more fun. And some people, cost is a barrier. I will hopefully give you the tips here to say that you don't need a costly gym membership to be able to do this. The best exercise for most people with diabetes is simply walking, which doesn't require a gym membership. But if you want to incorporate some of that resistance training, for example, you can use milk jugs, soup cans. You could purchase a resistance band for $10 or $15 and do all of the resistance training that you would ever need with a band. So let's talk about some of these barriers and try to debunk some of the myths. And this is these myths can be debilitating if you have it in your head that I don't have time to exercise, it's too hard. And hopefully I can help convince you through some research studies what the data actually says. So we'll talk about 5 different barriers or excuses that might be there. And these are, I don't have time, it's no pain or no gain, all it takes is willpower, it's all or nothing, or tomorrow will be better, mañana, as they say in South America. So the first one is what we just saw. 68% of us say, I don't have time. Lack of time is my number one barrier. And this is true. Everyone says this, from healthy young individuals to older adults to different diseases. It's the number one cited barrier. And hopefully I'll convince you today, and there's lots of writing on this, that it's not necessarily that you don't have time. It's trying to learn how to reprioritize or to fit exercise into your life. So this is some data from a colleague of mine, Dr. Mary Jung, that she's done, looking at people who are active, which is shown in white, and people who are inactive, which is shown in blue. And when they look here, it's not that the people that are active have more hours in the day. They don't have a 26-hour day and they can fit exercise in. And it's not even that they don't value or that they value their exercise goal more. So when they looked at how valuable is your exercise to you in the people that are active in white and inactive in blue. And the people that were inactive actually valued their exercise goal even more. When they looked at the time spent, not surprisingly, the active individuals spent a little bit more time on their goal than the non-active people. And then they looked at what other non-exercise goals these folks had, things like work, school, parenting duties. And they looked at the value that they placed on those and the time spent. And again, you can see here, it's not that the active people don't value other things. It's not that the active people don't spend time on other things. It's that they're able to prioritize to spend more time on their exercise goal. So again, I think there's this and there's other studies that show that it's not that the active individuals have more time in the day. It's that they have some of the skills they've been able to develop to be able to fit exercise into their life. And again, in the next couple of slides, I'll hopefully provide some info on how you can develop those skills. So not to insult you, but that lack of time issue is more like an excuse as opposed to a true barrier. And my exercise psychology colleagues have taught me that in the last few years. So the next common barrier that comes up is people say, if there's no pain in exercise, there's no gain. It's not worth it if I don't go hard, or if I don't hit that 150 minutes a week that the guidelines say, I might as well not do it. So some people would say, well, if some is good, more must be better, so I must do this. And this is simply untrue, and it's not good for us. It's kind of common sense. This can lead to burnout, injury, high rates of failure. So if you're trying to exercise an hour a day right off the start and you haven't exercised for years, you're most likely going to fail, and then you're going to be demoralized and you're going to have low confidence in yourself and be disappointed. So you don't have to rethink of this, and you don't have to hit that 150 minutes a day. You don't have to exercise for 30 minutes. Again, as little as 10 minutes of exercise is going to have some benefits. And the best benefits you get are from moving from doing nothing to doing a little bit. So don't think that you have to struggle and sweat and strain during exercise to get any benefits. Certainly that's not the case. The next one, and this is the big one, and hopefully if you take one thing away from this, whether you're an individual that they're trying to exercise or a healthcare provider trying to help your clients or your patients, and that's people think that it takes willpower. And my colleagues that work on health behavior change, they hate this term willpower. And people say, I failed because I don't have enough willpower. I'll try harder next time. I'll give it a better go. And this idea of willpower is simply not true. It's not will, it's skill. You need to learn the skills to be able to self-regulate and self-monitor and work exercise or any health behavior into your life. And the good thing is you can learn these skills. See, it's not an ingrained trait that, I have high willpower, therefore I can stick to exercise. I don't have willpower, therefore I can't. These are skills that you can learn. And individuals, healthcare providers, exercise professionals can help you learn these skills so that you can make exercise a part of your daily routine. So don't think of it as not having the willpower or being a failure because you're not good at that. These are skills you can learn, and I'll talk about them in the next couple of slides. And again, another common mistake or barrier that people make, and this always happens around January 1st of every year at New Year's resolution time, when people say, okay, that's it, I'm getting my life back in order. I'm going to exercise. I'm going to sleep better. I'm going to start a new diet. I'm going to floss every night. I'm going to be better at sticking to my medications. And doing this can set yourself up for failure, trying to change everything at once. And this is because from the way your brain works and the way sticking with these behaviors works, you have a limited amount, a limited resource in your brain to self-regulate all of these things. And these complex behaviors, exercise is certainly complex. There's lots of other options that you can do in the day, and it takes skill to be able to work that in. But if you're trying to regulate your diet, your medication, your sleep, your floss, and all those things all at the same time, your brain is going to be overloaded and not be able to regulate or process or use those skills that you have for exercise. So I would encourage you to not make all of those changes at once. And here's an example. Again, this doesn't matter if you can't read all of the details here, but this is a really cool study that was done a few years ago. And they looked at people in blue who meet the physical activity guidelines. So they get their 150 minutes a week. And those who don't meet the physical activity guidelines, so those who don't get 150 minutes a week, and they're shown in red. And down on the x-axis, the horizontal axis, is when the individuals chose to exercise. And those that exercised in the morning were much more likely to stick with that plan. So if they planned to exercise in the morning, they were more likely to get that exercise in versus when they planned it later on in the day. And these researchers concluded that it's most likely that because exercise requires these self-regulation skills, and you've got to be able to self-regulate and self-monitor to be able to fit exercise in, it's easier at the start of the day to fit this in. By the end of the day, you've had to deplete all of those resources and skills for all the other things that you're doing in your life, and therefore you don't have enough resource left at the end of the day. So this is a really cool idea. Again, it doesn't work for everybody, but a tip or a practical application would be, if you're having trouble with this, try to plan exercise at the start of your day when your self-regulation, your reserve tank is full, and then you're not trying to fit it in at the end of the day when there's a lot more excuses, a lot more things that you've had to regulate throughout the day. And the final one is just this idea of dreading when you will start the exercise program. So, and again, this is something that I struggle with in my life. I have ups and downs in my exercise routine, and oftentimes I look forward and I say, okay, this week is just really busy, lots going on. Next week, on Monday, I'm going to be better. And the research says 46% of people start diets on Monday, and 31% quit on Tuesday because they're deprived. They're saying, I don't really want to do this, so I'm going to put it off till next week, and then they deprive themselves and then they stop. And the same holds true for exercise. So the tip here is to try to reframe or reorient that, because if you're procrastinating, putting something off till next week, it suggests that you're dreading it. And dreading it suggests that you're planning for displeasure. You're saying, next week I'll start that darn exercise routine again. And this is probably not the best way to think cognitively about this. So trying to make exercise fun so that it's not a dreaded thing that you're going to do next week when you change your life around, but incorporating it into your overall routine. And if you're working with clients, it's trying to find out what that is for your client. So if your client hates swimming, you're not going to say, hey, why don't you go and sign up at the pool. They've got a great aqua class that you can do next Monday, and let's sign up. If the individual does not like swimming and going into the pool and getting changed, that's going to be planned dread for them, planned displeasure, and it's not the way to start an exercise program. So to summarize that up, exercise is a complex behavior. It's hard, and we know that. It's not like trying to change a behavior like I need to do up my seatbelt or I need to brush my teeth twice a day. Those are very simple behaviors to do, and they can become automatic. Exercise is not like that. You can help make it part of your day or like a habit, but it's certainly much more complex than brushing your teeth or buckling your seatbelt. There's going to be lapses. There's going to be times when even if you're a regular exerciser and you've been doing your morning workout for the last month, something's going to happen. You're going to get a cold. Your kid is going to get sick. Your grandchildren are going to need to be babysat. And there's going to be lapses. The thing that you want to be able to do is to have the skills to be able to overcome those lapses. And again, it's not willpower. It's learning the skills to be able to get over that. We know that this won't happen on its own. So just saying, hey, next week I'm going to start exercising, I'll have the willpower to do it. We need to work on the skills to be able to do this. And you can be taught these skills, but it takes a little bit of time and effort. There's going to always be temptations, certainly, especially those individuals who said they don't enjoy exercise. It's often a lot more tempting to sit on the couch and watch TV after dinner than it is to get an exercise in. But again, you work with this and don't plan your exercise to happen after dinner when that temptation is going to be there. The big thing is you can learn from your successes. So little baby steps can lead to big successes. So don't start with a 1 hour a day walk. Start with 10 minutes if you're just getting into it. And once you can do that 10 minutes, feel good about yourself that you're able to do it, and then start adding on more. You're your biggest advocate in this. So if you think you can do it, then you can. So the good news is that other people can help, and there's physical activity counselors. These might be your diabetes educators. They could be your physician. They could be your personal trainer or activity specialist, and they can help you to increase all of these skills and motivation that you need. And we know that they help. So if you get help from somebody, or you are the helper, that improves people's ability to stick to exercise, and it seems to last at least for up to 6 months or a year. The CDA has some great resources for professionals to help you with physical activity and exercise counseling. I'm sure if you're a patient or diabetes, you go see a healthcare professional, some of these resources might be helpful for you as well, and the link is there. And I would encourage you to seek out a local exercise or lifestyle change program in your community, and it'll help you to learn some of these skills that you need to be able to self-regulate and motivate and overcome any of those lapses. And if you are a counselor, there's a very good resource here. It's a free article you can download. It's very short, meant for healthcare providers. And they call it the ABCDs of lifestyle counseling. So you might have heard of the 5 A's approach, or that is often used in smoking cessation. Sometimes those things work, but in lifestyle it's a little bit different than smoking, and we can't often use the same tactics. But there's been some good evidence that the ABCDs of lifestyle counseling work, and that's where you assess your patient's readiness for change, identify the most important barriers to them, encourage them to commit to a goal, so set a goal, and then help them demonstrate their progress by using a self-monitoring strategy, so tracking some of their behavior. And that's much more simple now with all the different apps and things that people have access to in terms of monitoring their activity or their diet. And so again, there's this resource which you can download for free. It gives you some tips on how to do this in 2 minutes or less. You can assess, look at the barriers, get your client to commit, and then use an app or some monitoring strategy to demonstrate. And again, if you're not a healthcare provider, you can use these tips. If it works for the healthcare providers, you can use some of these in designing how you can get exercise built into your own life and your own behaviors. So just to sum that all up, starting and maintaining a regular exercise program requires skill. So it's not willpower, it's skill, but you can learn these. This can be trained. You got to recognize that there's going to be challenges, bumps, and up and downs all along the way. Success in maintaining your regular exercise requires self-regulatory skills, which you can learn. Self-monitoring, goal setting, relapse prevention, getting back on track, committing to a goal, all of these things with those resources that are available, or seeking help from an exercise trainer or exercise professional can help you. And you can learn these, and then they can be transferable, and then when you have a lapse, you can get back on track better, as opposed to dreading your next exercise and hoping that you're going to have more willpower next time. So there, we covered some of the barriers. Hopefully those resources will be helpful. And now we've got some practical exercise options. So what are some exercises that I can do? And I've developed some videos. Hopefully they work. We did have a couple of technical issues with getting videos from me onto the web platform here, but we think we've sorted it out. But some caveats before we go on about prescribing exercises for anybody. So certainly I've tried to pick some exercises based on my experience working primarily with older adults with type 2 diabetes who've done research studies in our lab. But certainly the best exercise is not what I tell you to do. It's the one that you're going to stick to yourself. Try to make it fun. An exercise partner or a group can be a motivator, but it's not necessary. You can work out alone. If you're in your house, you can do some of these exercises by yourself. It's also important to note some exercises, they just don't work for some people. So if you had a knee injury when you were 30 years old and when you do squats, it makes that knee hurt too much, don't do squats, even if someone told you it was a great exercise to do. Don't sweat it. If you're working with an exercise professional, they're usually very good at adapting these. But if an exercise doesn't work for you, don't worry about it. You can find an adaptation or something else to do. Anyone with diabetes, our guidelines state we should always ask our doctor or diabetes educator if exercise is right for you. So in general, everybody can get out and try to be more active and do things like walking. If you're going to jump in and start doing resistance training or anything above walking, it's always a good idea to ask your doctor, hey, is this okay for me to do? Do you suggest or recommend that I do it? And then coupled with that, seeking the help of an exercise professional or qualified personal trainer, it can always be a good idea. Lots of the people I work with will enlist a personal trainer for 1 or 2 sessions just to get an idea, make sure they're doing the exercises right, and then that's all they need. They can go on from there. And be creative. Dumbbells don't have to be dumbbells. They can be soup cans. They can be milk jugs. Resistance bands are inexpensive. They're very versatile. And take your dog, exercise with your children, with your grandchildren. Do it with people that you love, and you're more likely to stick to it. So here are the exercises, and I've tried to color code them. And there's 10 here. There's a couple of variations of each. The ones in blue are the beginner. And a beginner I'm qualifying here as you've just started or you haven't exercised for years. And there's the ones listed there. Intermediate would be if you exercise occasionally or you're used to be active but you haven't done it for the last year or so. And then advanced is you're currently a regular exerciser and you want to step up your exercise program. So let's see if these videos are going to work for us. This is a resistance band row. You can do this. You can find a stable object. You wrap your resistance band around, and you just slowly squeeze your shoulder blades together and curl your arms in. You're going to work your biceps and your back. Get lots of muscles engaged. That means more glucose gets sucked up after exercise. The next one, we'll see if this one will work for us. These are resistance band curls. Very simple. You're stepping on the resistance band and curling your biceps up. You can do this with soup cans or milk jugs too, or dumbbells. This one's a little bit more advanced. This is a chair squat, so it's always good to put a chair behind you. And you're just going to bend your knees down. Your weight is in your heels, and you're squatting into the chair. Trevor, this person that's doing the exercise here is holding a ball because that helps him balance when he does these squats. So those are all beginner type exercises. Now we're moving into intermediate. Trevor's doing the same squat here, but he's holding a ball. Again, this could be any weighted object. And he's extending it over his head after. Now he's going to be working not only his lower body, but his upper body at the same time in the same exercise. Here's one where Trevor's working his core. He's on his knees. His abs are tight, so he's pulling his belly button into his spine. And he's just holding that plank position, pretending he's a straight board. And here's a little bit more advanced. If you can move from your knees, you move to your toes. And that's going to be working his back muscles, his abs, and his core to get all of those muscles engaged to suck up the glucose. And I think we'll do one more here. You can see this is an example of the intervals. So Trevor is walking here, and I've just asked him to speed up the pace here. This is what an interval is for someone with type 2 diabetes or who's accustomed to exercise. He's not sprinting. He's not falling off the back of the treadmill.
30 seconds,
he's
Trevor,
just
and then
picking up
bring
his
it back
pace a
down
little
to
bit.
your
He starts with
recovery
30-second bursts where he's picking up the pace, and he brings it back down, and he progresses so that he can do this up to about 3 minutes. And you can also do this on the stairs. So if you don't have a treadmill and you don't want to go outside because it's winter in Canada, you can find stairs, and stairs is going to add that little bit of extra boost to your walking workout if you're in that advanced group. I thank you for your time, and we have a few minutes for questions. I'm happy to answer them, and if I don't get to your questions, I see a lot listed here. I'll attempt to answer them afterwards via texting or typing in the answer. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Dr. Little, for developing a great presentation on exercise. Lots of great tips there to get us motivated. So now it is question period time. So our first question is, I exercise to lose weight, and for the last 2 months, I've stalled. How can I get back to losing?
Okay, so it becomes a complex answer to exercise and weight loss. Exercise for weight loss is you also need to change your diet for it to be very effective. And typically what you're talking about there is you lose weight at the start, and then your body is defending against a weight loss there. So exercise becomes helping you maintain that weight loss after the first couple of months, but it's dietary changes that are going to really drive the weight loss after the first few months. So you're not doing anything wrong because you've stalled after that. The exercise is probably helping you to prevent the regain, but it's diet that's going to be the big driver now.
Okay, thank you for that. So we are almost close to the end of the webinar, so we're only going to be able to take 1 or 2 questions. But please email us your questions at webinars@diabetes.ca, and we'd be happy to answer them. So our next question is, I'm a type 1 diabetic, and I work out with weight training vigorously for about 1 hour, 5 times per week. On more than one occasion, my blood sugar would rocket to 18 or higher after working out. I wonder why this happens.
Yeah, so that's a common thing that can happen. What happens is, particularly type 1 diabetes, when you'll have a counter-regulatory hormones which get released during exercise, and they tell your liver, we're exercising, we need glucose. So that your liver starts pumping out a bunch of glucose, and it overshoots what your muscles are sucking up. And that in some high-intensity exercise situations can lead to high glucose after. It's tricky. Everyone's a little bit different. Some tips for that is it tends to happen more if you exercise before you've eaten. So people that exercise before breakfast, they tend to get that. Or if you haven't eaten in the last little bit or taken your insulin for a while, then it can happen because what happens when you wake up, your liver's pumping out glucose already, and if you don't eat, the high intensity exercise can cause that overshoot. So maybe, I'm not sure when you're exercising, but one tip might be to don't exercise before eating and exercise after. But again, it's a little bit tricky in type 1 diabetes because as you're probably aware, adjusting your insulin dose is going to be required around that exercise bout.
Okay, thank you. And our last question, I get some joint pain and inflammation with exercise over 20 minutes. Any suggestions?
Okay, and that's common. We see that many times. The good thing to know is that when you're doing only 20 minutes, you're still getting some benefits. What we suggest there is you can try to split your exercise. So let's say you're 20 and you start getting the pain. You could try to do 15 minutes in the morning, 15 minutes at night. Or another thing that works really well for the individuals who we've had doing research studies is you might do 10 minutes of walking and then they switch over and do 10 minutes of biking and then 10 minutes of elliptical, for example. So if you have access to that type of equipment, I know it's getting a little bit more challenging there, but when we do that, we tend to avoid some of those joint pains that come on after 20 minutes of walking by sharing the load amongst a couple different exercise machines.
Great, thank you so much. And that concludes our webinar for today. I'd sincerely like to thank Dr. Little for speaking on behalf of the Canadian Diabetes Association. It's been a great learning experience. And just a reminder, our webinars will be available online to everyone in the coming weeks. For our upcoming webinars is October 4th, Your Eyes Matter, and October 12th will be End Diabetes Research, and that will be with CDA's very own Dr. Jen Hux, so please tune in. For any 2015 or 2016 webinars you may have missed, you can visit diabetes.ca/webinars. Also a note that we have our Fall Expo Series, which has begun, and so on the screen you'll see where they're taking place, and if you'd like to register, you can just go to diabetes.ca/expo. And as always, if you're looking for more support and resources for living well with diabetes, feel free to call our toll-free line at 1-800-BANTEEN, and so that's 1-800-226-8464. And again, thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you've enjoyed learning with the CDA, and we look forward to your participation in the future.